fire!
We want her out!
Kill the beast!
The marketplace of Greyhaven had always been loud. Vendors shouted over one another. Children darted between stalls. Iron pots clanged, and the scent of baked bread tangled with sweat and livestock. It was the kind of noise that meant life until the shouting changed. Rowan first noticed it from his forge at the edge of the square. The rhythm was wrong. Not bartering. Not laughter. Anger. He stepped out from beneath the soot-dark awning, wiping his hands on a worn leather apron. A crowd had formed near the central well. Not a curious crowd. A tight one. Faces hardened. Shoulders squared. At the center stood a lone orc woman. She was taller than most in the square, green skin marked with faint ash-colored lines across her forearms. Clan markings, Rowan guessed. Her travel cloak was dusty, hood lowered to reveal braided dark hair and sharp amber eyes that did not show fear, but calculation. She stole from Jaren's stall, someone shouted. She's scouting, another voice accused. We don't want your kind here. The word struck like thrown stones. Rowan scanned quickly. Jaren the spice merchant stood red-faced near the front, clutching an overturned crate. She knocked it over. Jaren barked, took advantage of the chaos. The orc woman's voice cut through the shouting, low and steady. I took nothing. Her accent was clipped but clear. A rotten apple flew from somewhere in the back, striking her shoulder. She did not flinch. That's Redthorn markings, a man muttered. Border raiders. The crowd tightened. Someone shoved her. Another hand grabbed at her cloak. Rowan felt something twist in his chest. He had seen fear turn into violence before. It never required proof. Only momentum. He moved before thinking too long. Enough. Rowan's voice rang sharper than his hammer ever had. The crowd barely registered him at first. He stepped fully between them and the orc woman. She said she took nothing. He said firmly. You defending her now? Someone spat. I'm defending fairness, Rowan replied. She's one of them. And she's one person standing alone, he shot back. A heavy-set butcher stepped forward, cleaver still hanging at his side. Step aside, blacksmith. Rowan did not move. She hasn't drawn a blade, he said. None of you have proof. She doesn't need a blade to cause trouble. Another shove came, this time into Rowan's shoulder. He held his ground. The orc woman spoke quietly behind him. You should not do this. Too late, he muttered without looking back. A fist flew. It struck Rowan across the jaw, snapping his head sideways. The taste of blood filled his mouth instantly. The crowd surged. He planted his boots hard against the cobblestone, arms outstretched to block further blows from reaching her. A second punch hit his ribs. Someone tried to grab his collar and drag him aside. Back up, he shouted, shoving one man away. The butcher swung, not with the cleaver, but with a heavy forearm. Rowan staggered, but did not fall. Behind him, he felt the orc woman shift. Do not, he warned under his breath. I will not strike first, she replied evenly. A stone hit Rowan's shoulder. Another grazed his temple. The mob's anger was no longer about spice crates or theft. It was about fear given permission. Then, something shifted. A small voice from the edge of the square, old Marin, the baker, called out sharply. Have any of you seen her steal? Silence flickered uncertainly. Jaren hesitated. Well, no, but nothing, Rowan said, breath heavy. You're beating someone because she's different. The orc woman stepped slightly forward now, not past him, but beside him. Her presence alone unsettled the nearest men. I crossed your town seeking the northern road, she said clearly. I did not seek conflict. The butcher glanced at the blood on Rowan's lip. This isn't your fight, he growled. It became mine, Rowan replied. More townsfolk began murmuring, less certain now, doubt creeping into rage. The crowd did not disperse immediately, but it loosened. One by one, fists lowered. Jaren righted his crate awkwardly. The butcher spat near Rowan's boots before stepping back. This isn't over, someone muttered. The crowd thinned slowly, leaving behind overturned baskets and scattered fruit. Rowan wiped blood from his mouth with the back of his hand. You're bleeding, the orc woman observed. I've had worse from stubborn horses, he replied. She studied him with unreadable intensity. You stood against your own, she said. I stood against a mob. Her gaze softened, barely. You understand what you have done? I stopped something ugly. No, she said quietly. You have invoked Redthorn law. Rowan frowned slightly. I don't know what that means. You will. He glanced around the square as townsfolk avoided his eyes. What's your name? He asked. Kayla of Redthorn. Rowan. She nodded once. Rowan, she repeated carefully. A faint horn sounded in the distance beyond the town walls. Low, deep, not human. Rowan felt the weight of it in his bones. Kayla's expression changed, not to fear, to recognition. They know, she said. Know what? That a life was defended. Rowan exhaled slowly. He had only meant to stop a beating. He had not meant to start something larger. But as the distant horn echoed once more across the hills, he understood, dimly, that the marketplace riot was not the end of it. It was the beginning. The horn did not sound again that afternoon, but its echo lingered in Rowan's thoughts long after the marketplace returned to uneasy routine. Word spread quickly, faster than truth ever did in a town like Greyhaven. By the time Rowan returned to his forge, neighbors were already whispering in doorways, glancing toward him as though he carried something contagious. Kayla followed at a measured distance. Not clinging, not hiding, simply present. You do not need to walk with me, Rowan said quietly as he pushed open the forge door. I do, she replied. The interior of the forge smelled of coal and heated iron. Familiar. Grounding. Rowan moved automatically toward the basin to wash blood from his split lip. You should have let them strike me, Kayla said. Rowan snorted lightly. That was the plan, was it? I can endure it. That doesn't make it right. She studied him carefully. Your people do not often intervene for mine, she said. Mob justice doesn't sit well with me, he replied. You misunderstand, she said quietly. It was not intervention alone. Rowan dried his hands slowly. Then what was it? You took blows meant for me. He shrugged slightly. It wasn't exactly a heroic calculation. In Redthorn law, she continued, ignoring the deflection, to shield another with your body, without blood oath, without kinship, creates obligation. Obligation, he echoed. Life debt. The phrase landed heavier than he expected. Rowan leaned against the edge of his anvil. You're saying because I stood there like a stubborn mule, I owe your clan something? Her eyes narrowed slightly. No, she corrected. We owe you. He blinked once. That horn, she said. It carried message. You can send messages with horns? Yes. And what was the message? She held his gaze steadily. That a Redthorn was defended by human blood. Silence filled the forge. That's not necessary, Rowan said quickly. I didn't do it for reward. Dead is not reward, she replied. It is binding. Rowan rubbed his jaw, still tender. I didn't ask for binding. You did not need to. Outside, footsteps paused near the forge door. Voices murmured low, uneasy. They'll think I've aligned with you, Rowan muttered. They already do. A knock sounded sharply against the wood. Rowan opened the door to find 3 members of the town council standing stiffly in the lane, Mayor Harlan at their head. We need a word, Harlan said. Rowan stepped outside, closing the door behind him, but not fully shutting Kayla out of earshot. You've caused tension, the mayor began bluntly. The people are uneasy. Because I stopped a beating? Rowan shot back. Because you sided publicly with an orc, Harlan corrected. I sided against violence. The mayor's gaze shifted toward the forge door. She remains in town? For now. Harlan's mouth tightened. That may invite trouble. She was passing through. Or scouting, another councilman muttered. Rowan stepped forward slightly. You saw no theft. No weapon drawn. That doesn't mean. It means fear made the decision. The council exchanged looks. You are a blacksmith, Harlan said carefully. You serve this town. And I still do. Then consider how this appears. Rowan held his ground. I'll consider it, he said, though his tone made clear he would not bend. The council left with quiet dissatisfaction. Inside, Kayla had not moved from where she stood. They will pressure you, she said. I noticed. They may ask you to renounce what happened. I won't. Her gaze sharpened. You risk isolation. I risked worse this morning. She stepped closer now, close enough that he could see faint scars along her forearms. Battle-earned, not ornamental. You must understand, she said quietly. Redthorn does not ignore such act. I don't need protection. You misunderstand again, she said. Protection will come whether you desire it. A faint tremor of unease settled in his stomach. How many are we talking about? Enough. He let out a slow breath. I didn't mean to start something. You did not start it, she replied. You revealed it. Outside, distant hoofbeats echoed faintly beyond the town's southern road. Rowan glanced toward the hills. Is that them? Kayla did not answer immediately. Instead, she walked to the forge doorway and stood beside him. Yes, she said at last. The sound grew clearer, multiple riders, disciplined rhythm. Rowan swallowed. Tell me this doesn't mean what I think it means. It means, she said evenly, my clan honors its debts. He watched dust rise faintly along the distant road. I only defended one person. You defended Redthorn. The weight of that distinction settled fully for the first time. He had stepped into a crowd to stop injustice. Now an entire clan was riding toward Greyhaven because of it. And whether he welcomed it or not, the debt had already begun. The riders did not enter Greyhaven quietly. They came in disciplined formation, crimson and black banners snapping sharply in the wind as iron-shod hooves struck the cobbled road. There were 12 of them, broad-shouldered, armored, axes and spears secured but not raised. They did not shout. They did not raid. They simply rode straight through the southern gate. Panic spread faster than wildfire. Shopkeepers abandoned stalls. Mothers pulled children indoors. The town bell began clanging wildly, though no one seemed certain whether it was warning or habit. Rowan stood outside his forge as the riders approached, Kayla beside him. You said enough, he muttered. This is restraint, she replied calmly. The lead rider dismounted first. He was older than the rest, tusks slightly worn, braided beard bound with iron rings. His armor bore etched markings denoting rank. Authority radiated from him without effort. He stepped forward and stopped 3 paces from Rowan. You are the human called Rowan? The orc asked, voice deep but controlled. That depends who's asking, Rowan replied, though his palms felt warmer than usual. I am Thuruk of Redthorn, the warrior said. Blade captain to Chieftain Arvek. Rowan glanced briefly at Kayla. She speaks truth. Thuruk asked without looking at her. She does, Rowan answered. Thuruk studied him in silence, eyes sharp but not hostile. You stood before many, he said. Unarmed. I had a hammer, Rowan replied automatically. A faint rumble moved through the other warriors. Amusement, perhaps. You bled, Thuruk continued. Not much. You bled enough. The marketplace had begun filling again, at a distance. Townsfolk clustered near doorways, whispering urgently. Mayor Harlan pushed forward nervously. What is the meaning of this? He demanded. Thuruk turned slowly toward him. We come not for war, he said evenly. We come for honor. Honor, Harlan echoed, voice thin. Redthorn law is clear, Thuruk said. When blood shields blood without oath, dead is sworn. Rowan sighed quietly. I told her I didn't need this. You do not choose dead, Thuruk replied. It chooses you. The other riders dismounted in unison and formed a loose semicircle around Rowan. Not threatening, but protective. The gesture did not calm the crowd. You can't just march into our town, someone shouted. Thuruk's gaze swept the square. We march nowhere beyond this, he said calmly. We stand. Kayla stepped forward now, addressing the onlookers directly. Your blacksmith prevented violence, she said. Redthorn answers with protection, not punishment. A murmur of disbelief rippled outward. Protection from what? Harlan demanded. Thuruk's eyes shifted back to Rowan. From consequences of courage, he answered. Rowan rubbed the back of his neck. I didn't ask to be guarded. You did not need to, Kayla said quietly. Thuruk stepped closer and, to the shock of nearly everyone present, removed his gauntlet. He drew a short blade, not raised in threat, but lowered in ceremony. Rowan stiffened. What are you doing? He asked. Witness, Thuruk said. He dragged the blade lightly across his own palm. Dark blood welled immediately. Several townsfolk gasped. Thuruk pressed his bleeding palm against his chest, directly over the Redthorn insignia. By clan law, he declared loudly, voice carrying across the square, Rowan of Greyhaven is under Redthorn protection until debt is repaid. Silence crushed the air. You don't need to cut yourself for that, Rowan muttered. It is required, Thuruk replied evenly. He then extended his hand toward Rowan. The meaning was unmistakable. Rowan hesitated. If I don't, he asked quietly. Thuruk's expression did not change. The debt remains, he said, but unsealed. Kayla met Rowan's eyes. If you refuse, you insult no one, she said softly. But understand, others may test what they think unguarded. Rowan glanced around the square. The fear in the townsfolk's eyes had shifted. No longer purely anger. Now uncertainty. He stepped forward. I'm not swearing loyalty, he said clearly. You are acknowledging bond, Thurrock corrected. Rowan exhaled slowly and clasped Thurrock's forearm, not cutting himself, not mirroring the blood ritual, but meeting strength with strength. The gesture was enough. Thurrock nodded once. The warriors relaxed marginally, though they did not disperse. We remain near, Thurrock said. How near? Rowan asked. Close enough. Mayor Harlan looked pale. You cannot just set up camp in our town, he protested. Thurrock's gaze flicked toward him. We can. The statement was not boastful. It was factual. By evening, red thorn tents had been erected just outside Greyhaven's southern wall. Orderly, contained, disciplined. They did not raid stores. They did not intimidate passers-by. They simply watched. Rowan stood at his forge door as torchlight flickered beyond the fields. You've made me the most protected man in town, he muttered. Kayla stood beside him. You stood alone this morning, she said. I preferred that. She studied him quietly. You will not stand alone now. He looked toward the distant tents. His single act in the marketplace had drawn an entire clan to his doorstep. And as the sun dipped below the hills, Rowan realized something heavier than gratitude had arrived with them. Expectation. By morning, Greyhaven no longer felt like the same town. Red thorn tents stood in disciplined rows just beyond the southern gate, crimson banners visible above canvas edges. Smoke from their cook fires rose in thin, controlled spirals. They had not taken supplies. They had not crossed the walls uninvited. Yet their presence pressed against Greyhaven like an approaching storm. Inside town, tension crackled. Rowan opened his forge at first light, as he always did. The hammering steadied him. Iron behaved predictably. Heat, pressure form. Unlike people, customers, however, did not behave predictably. Old Marin arrived first, setting down a sack of flour on his workbench without speaking. After a moment, she cleared her throat. You did right, she said quietly. Mob's never the answer. Rowan nodded once in thanks. But not everyone came with flour. By mid-morning, 3 farmers stood outside the forge, arms folded. You've invited trouble, one of them said bluntly. I didn't invite anyone, Rowan replied. They're camping outside our gate. They're honoring their law. We don't follow their law. Rowan wiped soot from his forearm. They're not breaking ours. That doesn't mean it stays peaceful. The unspoken fear lingered. What if more arrived? What if retaliation came? What if neighboring towns saw banners and assumed invasion? Rowan stepped outside. They haven't threatened anyone, he said evenly. They haven't taken so much as a loaf of bread. They don't need to, another farmer muttered. Their presence is threat enough. Before Rowan could respond, Mayor Harlan appeared again, flanked by 2 council members. Town meeting, Harlan announced sharply. Now. The square filled faster than Rowan expected. Some came out of anger. Others curiosity. A few simply came to see how close the orc camp truly was. The Redthorn warriors did not approach. They remained where they were. Watching, Harlan climbed the well platform. This situation is unstable, he declared. Our town cannot function with foreign warriors at our doorstep. They're there because of me, Rowan said from the crowd. And that is precisely the issue, Harlan snapped. A murmur of agreement rose. You acted without considering consequences. I considered the beating happening in front of me, Rowan replied. You made a private decision that became public risk. Kayla stepped forward from beside Rowan. It was not private, she said evenly. It was witnessed by all. Gasps rippled through the square. Some stepped back automatically. Harlan pointed toward the southern gate. Your clan camps outside our walls. Yes, Kayla answered calmly. That looks like intimidation. It is restraint, she corrected. A shopkeeper shouted from behind the crowd. How long do they plan to stay? Until the dead is honored, Kayla replied. And what does that mean? Harlan demanded. It means, she said, eyes steady, Rowan's safety is Redthorn's responsibility. From what? Someone cried. From those who would test him. The words cut deeper than intended. Eyes shifted uneasily. Rowan stepped up beside Kayla. No one needs protecting from our own people, he said firmly. A few in the crowd avoided his gaze. You stood against many, Kayla reminded him quietly. That was different. Was it? Silence settled heavier. Harlan pressed forward. Greyhaven is not battlefield for clan politics, he said sharply. We demand the Redthorn withdraw. A ripple of tension passed through the watching townsfolk. Kayla's voice did not rise. If we withdraw and harm comes to him, debt becomes bloodbound. The phrase chilled the square. What does that mean? Marin whispered. It means retaliation, someone else answered quietly. Rowan stepped forward fully now, anger edging his voice. No one is retaliating against anyone, he said. I stopped a fight. That's it. A young man near the back muttered. Or started something bigger. The words hung. Divisions began showing clearly. Those who admired Rowan's courage. Those who feared consequences. Those who resented change. Harlan lowered his voice. We cannot force them away, he admitted reluctantly. But we can limit interaction. Isolation breeds misunderstanding, Kayla said. Interaction breeds escalation, Harlan countered. Rowan looked around at the faces he had known for years. These were people he had repaired plows for, shod horses for, forged hinges and gates for. Now they looked at him differently. Not as blacksmith. As catalyst. I didn't ask for warriors, Rowan said quietly. But I won't apologize for stopping cruelty. Marin stepped forward. Maybe we stop pretending this is about banners, she said. It's about fear. The crowd shifted again. Fear. Not theft. Not invasion. Fear. Kayla turned slowly, addressing them all. We do not seek control, she said. We seek balance. The words sounded foreign in the square. Harlan sighed heavily. This town is divided, he said. He wasn't wrong. As the meeting dissolved into uneasy clusters of conversation, Rowan felt the weight of it settle fully. He had defended one person. Now the town stood split along lines no one had noticed before. And just beyond the walls, Redthorn banners still stood firm. Not advancing. Not retreating. Waiting. The first stone struck Rowan's forge just after midnight. It shattered against the outer wall, sending chips of mortar scattering across the yard. Rowan was awake instantly, years of early mornings sharpening his instincts. Before he could reach the door, a second stone crashed through the front window, scattering glass across the workbench. Stay inside. Kayla's voice came sharply from the darkness. She had not left his forge since the council meeting. Redthorn law demanded proximity until the debt stabilized, and she had chosen to remain personally rather than sleep in the camp outside the walls. A third stone flew, this one wrapped in cloth, soaked in oil, flame licking its edges. Kayla moved faster than Rowan could think. She snatched a half-finished blade from the table and cut the burning cloth free midair before it could ignite the timber wall. The stone clattered harmlessly to the floor. Outside, footsteps scattered. Rowan flung the door open. Stop, he shouted into the dark lane. Two figures bolted around the corner, faces hidden beneath hoods. Kayla stepped past him, eyes scanning shadows. Do not chase blindly, she warned. I won't, he muttered, though anger churned hot in his chest. Within moments, horn signals answered from beyond the southern gate. Short, sharp notes. Redthorn Patrol. The warriors arrived swiftly, silent shapes emerging from darkness with disciplined precision. Thurrock led them, expression hard. They tested, he said simply after surveying the broken window. Kids with stones, Rowan replied tightly. Not children, Thurrock corrected, crouching to inspect the oil-soaked cloth. Deliberate. Kayla's jaw tightened. They wish to provoke retaliation, she said. Rowan kicked one of the stones aside. They're angry, he muttered. They are being steered, Thurrock replied. The following morning, word of the attack spread as quickly as the marketplace riot had days before. This time, however, the Redthorn did not remain outside the walls. They entered in pairs. Not to intimidate, but to guard. Two warriors positioned themselves near Rowan's forge without blocking passage. Others patrolled the southern quarter calmly, acknowledging townsfolk with silent nods rather than challenge. Reactions were immediate. This is occupation, one man hissed. They're protecting him, Marin countered. From us. Kayla stood outside the forge as Rowan replaced shattered glass. You do not need to do this publicly, he said quietly. Yes, I do. They'll resent it. They already do. A group of young men passed by, glaring openly. One spat near the boots of a Redthorn guard. The guard did not react. The restraint unsettled more than retaliation would have. Later that afternoon, Harlan approached Rowan with visible frustration. You see what this has become? The mayor demanded. Warriors in our streets. They didn't light my forge on fire, Rowan replied. No, but their presence encourages division. The attack encouraged division. Harlan hesitated. We can handle our own lawbreakers. Then find them, Kayla said evenly. The mayor's lips thinned. As tension simmered, something unexpected began happening. A farmer whose plow Rowan had repaired last winter approached the forge cautiously. They're disciplined, the farmer admitted quietly, nodding toward the Redthorn guards. Haven't touched a thing. They won't, Rowan replied. Later, two children lingered near the southern gate, staring wide-eyed at the orc camp. Instead of driving them away, a Redthorn warrior knelt and handed one of them a small carved wooden charm, crude but carefully shaped. The child smiled. The mother did not. By evening, the town no longer felt purely hostile, just uncertain. Kayla stood beside Rowan as he closed the forge for the night. They will test again, she said. I know. Until they believe the protection is real. Rowan glanced at the Redthorn sentries silhouetted by torchlight. It is real, he admitted quietly. Yes. He leaned against the doorframe. I never wanted to choose sides. You did not, she replied. I chose decency. And decency drew line. He looked at her carefully. You don't have to stay inside my forge. I do, she said calmly. The debt binds personally. He hesitated. Why you, he asked. She met his gaze steadily. Because I was the one you shielded. The simplicity of that answer settled something unspoken between them. Outside the town walls, Redthorn banners still stood, but now they no longer felt like invasion. They felt like statement. And inside Greyhaven, resentment had not vanished, but neither had admiration. Rowan realized as he barred the door for the night that protection was not the same as control, but it changed the balance. He had defended one life. Now an entire clan defended his. And whether Greyhaven accepted it or not, the debt was no longer abstract. It stood guard at his door. The second attack did not come with stones. It came with fire beyond the fields. Just before dawn, a barn belonging to old Garen at the northern edge of Greyhaven went up in flames. The blaze spread quickly through dry hay, smoke rolling thick and black against the paling sky. By the time townsfolk formed a bucket line from the well, half the structure had collapsed inward. Whispers started before the embers cooled. Retaliation. Orc warning. They guard one man and burn the rest. Rowan stood in the muddy field beside Kayla, watching smoke curl from charred beams. His stomach twisted, not from fear this time, but from the speed of accusation. Your warriors were posted south, Garen muttered bitterly. North field left open. Thurrock stepped forward calmly. Redthorn patrols did not leave position, he said. How convenient, someone spat. Kayla crouched near the barn's foundation, fingers brushing through damp soil and blackened timber. She lifted something small from the ash, an iron nail twisted unnaturally, fused from intense heat. This was soaked with oil, she said quietly. Of course it was, Garen snapped. It burned. No, Kayla replied. This was set deliberately. Rowan knelt beside her. Any sign of boot prints? Too many, she answered. Bucket line trampled them. Thurrock turned slowly toward the growing crowd. Redthorn does not burn grain, he said evenly. We require grain. A few uneasy looks passed between townsfolk. Still, doubt lingered. Rowan felt it like weight pressing at his spine. Who benefits? He asked suddenly. The question silenced some of the muttering. Benefit, Harlan repeated. Who gains from this? Rowan pressed. You think the clan rides here to protect me only to burn your barns? It could be warning, a farmer insisted. Kayla stood slowly. It could be manipulation, she countered. That word hung heavier than accusation. By midday, another rumor spread, this time from the Redthorn camp. One of their outer patrols had been ambushed in the tree line beyond the southern hills. No fatalities, but injuries. And left behind near the scene was a torn strip of cloth bearing Greyhaven's merchant die stamp. The pattern mirrored too cleanly. Human goods at an attack on orcs. Orc suspicion at a fire in town. Rowan felt something colder than fear settle into place. They're trying to split us wider, he said quietly to Kayla. Yes. Not just townsfolk. Clan as well. Thurrock arrived shortly after with confirmation. The ambush was staged poorly, he said. Attackers fled before engagement. Mercenaries? Rowan asked. Perhaps. Or locals wanting chaos, Harlan muttered. The mayor's certainty was thinning. Kayla stepped closer to Rowan, lowering her voice. This is not about debt anymore, she said. It is about fracture. Rowan stared across the field where townsfolk and Redthorn warriors now worked side by side, clearing debris from Garen's barn. No one had ordered cooperation. It had simply begun when water buckets ran low and hands were needed. That's what they don't want, Rowan said quietly. By evening, Rowan made a decision that unsettled both sides. He walked openly to the Redthorn camp. Townsfolk watched from the walls. Redthorn warriors stiffened slightly, but did not block his path. Thuruk met him halfway. You should not walk alone, the blade captain said. I'm not alone, Rowan replied, glancing back at Greyhaven's silhouette against the sunset. Kayla stood behind him. I want to see the ambush site, Rowan said. Thuruk studied him. Why? Because whoever's doing this expects us to stay divided, Rowan answered. If I see what you see, I stop guessing. After a moment, Thuruk nodded. They rode south before full dark. At the tree lean, Rowan saw broken branches, scattered footprints, and a bolt embedded in a tree, human-made. Too obvious, he muttered. Yes, Kayla agreed. They want it traced. Thuruk crouched near a trampled patch of moss. Boot size smaller than clan standard, he noted. Rowan leaned closer. Merchant cut, he said quietly, examining a scrap of fabric tangled in brush. From a traveling trade company that passed through 2 weeks ago. Kayla's eyes narrowed. Outsiders, she said. Or hired locals, Rowan replied. The pieces began aligning in his mind. This wasn't mob anger anymore. It was orchestration. Back in Greyhaven that night, Rowan addressed the town square under torchlight. Whoever burned Garen's barn wants war, he said plainly. Whoever attacked the Redthorn patrol wants the same. You have proof, someone challenged. Enough to know it wasn't either of us, he replied. Kayla stood beside him. For every strike against them, she said, nodding toward the townsfolk, there is one against us. The symmetry chilled the crowd. Harlan stepped forward slowly. If this is manipulation, he said, then someone profits from conflict. Someone always does, Thuruk replied from the edge of the square. Silence fell, not hostile this time. Thinking. The enemy was no longer simply fear. It was shadow, and shadows required light. Rowan looked at Kayla. This isn't about a life dead anymore. No, she agreed. It's about stopping whoever's pulling the strings. For the first time since the marketplace riot, the town and clan were no longer staring at each other. They were staring outward. And somewhere in those shadows, someone realized their plan was beginning to unravel. The summons came at dawn. A Redthorn runner arrived at Rowan's forge carrying a carved bone token etched with the clan's spiral sigil. No words were needed. The symbol alone carried meaning. The chieftain calls, Kayla said quietly. Rowan turned the token over in his calloused fingers. Calls me. Yes. For what? To formalize or release the debt. He frowned slightly. I thought it was already sworn. It was declared, she corrected. Not sealed. The distinction mattered. By midday, Rowan rode south between Kayla and Thuruk, passing through the tree lean toward the Redthorn stronghold carved into the basalt cliffs. Greyhaven's walls shrank behind him, replaced by towering stone faces etched with clan markings and iron braziers burning steady against the wind. He felt eyes on him long before he saw the warriors assembled. They lined the approach in disciplined rows, not threatening, not welcoming. Assessing. Relax, Kayla murmured quietly. I am relaxed, he lied. At the fortress gate, drums beat once, low and resonant. Inside, the courtyard opened wide beneath jagged stone overhangs. At its center stood Chieftain Arvek of Redthorn, broad-shouldered, older than Thuruk, but no less imposing. His tusks bore ceremonial iron rings, and his armor carried the weight of many campaigns. Rowan dismounted without waiting for instruction. He did not kneel. He did not bow deeply either. He simply stood. Arvek studied him in silence that stretched long enough to test patience. You are the human who bled, the chieftain said at last. I am, Rowan replied evenly. You shielded my kin. I stopped the mob. A faint ripple passed through the watching warriors. Arvek descended the stone steps slowly. Intent does not erase consequence, he said. Nor does consequence erase intent, Rowan replied before thinking too carefully. Kayla's breath caught faintly beside him. Arvek's eyes sharpened, but not in anger. You speak plainly, he observed. I don't know how else. The chieftain circled him once, measuring stance, posture, heartbeat. You understand that Redthorn law binds life to life. Arvek continued. When blood shields blood, protection is owed until balance returns. I did not act for debt, Rowan said firmly. You did not need to. Silence deepened. Arvek stopped directly before him. You are given choice, he said. Murmurs rippled faintly among the gathered warriors. Choice. If you reject the bond, Arvek continued, Redthorn withdraws. No protection, no obligation. Your town stands alone. And if I accept? Rowan asked. You accept that harm against you becomes harm against us, Arvek replied. And harm against us becomes weight on you. Rowan felt that settle heavily. So either way, he said slowly, I am tied. Yes. He glanced briefly at Kayla. Her expression remained composed, but her hands were tight at her sides. This is bigger than a marketplace fight, Rowan said. It became so the moment clan banners rode, Arvek answered. Rowan exhaled slowly. If I accept, do I belong to Redthorn? You belong to yourself, Arvek replied evenly. But you walk under our watch. And if my town harms one of yours? Rowan pressed. Arvek did not hesitate. Then we judge carefully. The answer surprised him. You do not rush to retaliation? Redthorn does not rush blindly, the chieftain said. We endure. Then we answer. The courtyard waited. Rowan thought of the burned barn, the ambushed patrol, the shadows manipulating both sides. If he rejected the bond, Redthorn would withdraw, and whoever orchestrated chaos would strike harder. If he accepted, he became symbol, bridge, target. He stepped forward one pace. I won't swear loyalty, he said clearly. You are not asked to. I won't abandon Greyhaven. You are not asked to. I will not be weapon for clan politics. Arvek's gaze did not waver. Then accept not as weapon, he said. Accept as shield. The word echoed. Shield. Rowan extended his forearm. Arvek drew a short ceremonial blade, not threatening, not raised in challenge, and cut a shallow line across his own palm. Blood welled dark. He did not offer the blade to Rowan. Instead, he pressed his bleeding palm briefly against Rowan's forearm, marking him without demanding return. Gasps rippled softly. The debt is sealed, Arvek declared. Drums sounded once, deep and final. Kayla stepped closer, relief flickering in her eyes though her posture remained disciplined. Rowan looked at the faint smear of blood drying on his skin. What happens now? He asked quietly. Now, Arvek said, turning toward the assembled warriors. We protect what was protected. As Rowan rode back toward Greyhaven at sunset, Redthorn riders flanked him, not possessive, not controlling, guarding. He had not meant to stand before a chieftain. He had not meant to bind his fate to a clan. But as the fortress gates closed behind them and Greyhaven's distant rooftops came into view, he understood the truth. The life debt was no longer just obligation. It was alliance. And alliances, once chosen, reshaped everything. The attack came at the border ridge just before sunset, when shadows stretched long enough to hide movement and light thinned into uncertainty. Rowan had only just returned from Redthorn Fortress 2 days earlier. The sealed debt had shifted the balance in Greyhaven. Fear had not vanished, but hostility had softened into wary observation. For the first time, human and clan patrols had begun sharing information openly. That cooperation made someone desperate. A Redthorn scout arrived at Greyhaven's gate breathless, armor marked with ash. Border post under attack, he announced. Human traders ambushed near the ridge. Clan patrol engaged. The word struck like flint. Harlan paled immediately. Human traders? Yes. Rowan didn't hesitate. Who rides? He demanded. Thurok stepped forward. Redthorn moves already. Rowan grabbed his leather bracers from inside the forge. I'm coming. You are not a warrior, Harlan snapped. No, Rowan replied, strapping on his bracers. But this concerns my town. Kayla met his eyes. You understand this will not be marketplace shouting, she said quietly. I understand, he replied. They rode hard toward the ridge, hooves pounding through dirt and pine needles. Smoke was already visible above the tree-line when they crested the hill. The scene below churned with chaos. 2 overturned wagons burned along the narrow pass. Human merchants crouched behind crates, wielding makeshift weapons. Redthorn warriors held a defensive line farther down the slope, axes raised, but not charging. Between them, masked figures. Mercenaries. Not clan. Not town. Crossbows flashed. An arrow struck a redthorn shield. A bolt grazed a merchant's shoulder. "They're firing at both sides," Rowan muttered. "Divide and ignite," Kayla said coldly. Thurok barked orders in Orcish. Redthorn warriors advanced carefully, forming staggered cover while shielding the trapped traitors. Rowan slid from his horse without waiting for instruction. "Stay behind the line," Kayla ordered. "I need to reach the wagons," he shouted back. A masked attacker lunged from behind a rock, blade swinging toward Rowan's side. Kayla intercepted the strike with brutal precision, knocking the attacker aside before he could connect. "You do not outrun steel," she snapped. "I wasn't trying to," he replied, breath uneven. They moved together now, awkward at first, then instinctive. Rowan used a fallen wagon wheel as cover, dragging an injured merchant toward safety while Kayla stood between them and incoming bolts. Another masked fighter charged through smoke, shouting something incoherent about traitors to blood. Rowan recognized the accent. Not Greyhaven. Traveling sells words. He grabbed a broken spear shaft and swung low, tripping the attacker long enough for Thurok to disarm him. Within minutes, the attackers realized the trap had failed. Instead of humans striking orcs, or orcs retaliating against humans, both sides were fighting the same enemy. The mercenaries scattered. Redthorn archers did not pursue beyond the ridge. Restrain again. When the smoke thinned, wounded lay on both sides, but not dead. Kayla knelt beside a human merchant, binding his arm with cloth torn from her own sleeve. Rowan stared at the wrecked wagons. "They were meant to burn completely," he said quietly. "Yes." And the blame would have followed. Kayla met his gaze steadily. "Not today." Harlan arrived later with a small group from Greyhaven, breathless and shaken. He stopped short at the sight of Redthorn warriors standing guard over injured townsfolk. "They helped," a merchant said hoarsely before Harlan could speak. "They shielded us." Thurok stepped forward. "This was not Redthorn's strike," he said calmly. "Nor Greyhaven." Harlan looked around at the captured mercenary tied against a tree. "You were hired," Harlan demanded. The man spat blood but remained silent. Rowan crouched in front of him. "Who paid you?" he asked evenly. The mercenary smirked faintly. "You think I know? Coin moves. That's enough." "Whoever paid wanted war," Rowan said. The mercenary said nothing, but his silence confirmed it. As twilight deepened, humans and Redthorn warriors worked side by side to extinguish the remaining flames. No one ordered cooperation. It simply happened. By the time they rode back toward Greyhaven, the shift was unmistakable. Not trust, but recognition. Back at the southern gate, townsfolk gathered quietly as injured were carried through. No accusations rose. Only questions. Kayla dismounted beside Rowan. "You stood in open combat," she said quietly. "I stood where it was needed. You could have died. So could they." She studied him carefully. "You do not fight like warrior," she observed. "I don't fight like coward either," he replied. A faint curve touched her mouth. The border attack had been meant to split them beyond repair. Instead, blood had been spilled on both sides and defended by both sides. As night settled over Greyhaven and Redthorn campfires flickered beyond the walls, Rowan understood something with quiet clarity. The shadow enemy had underestimated one thing. Shared danger forged faster than shared fear. And now, the life debt was no longer just clan obligation. It was mutual defense, and that made it far harder to break. By the time the wounded merchants recovered, Greyhaven no longer looked at the Redthorn camp with the same suspicion. It did not look at Rowan the same way either. He had fought on the ridge, not as a warrior of the clan, not as a soldier of the town, but as something in between, that unsettled people more than banners ever had. 3 days after the border attack, a delegation arrived from the regional lord who governed the surrounding trade roads. Unlike the Redthorn riders, they entered with polished armor and rigid authority. Their leader, Captain Varric, carried the sigil of the crown stamped openly on his breastplate. "We have reports of instability," Varric announced in the town square. "Mercenary violence, foreign encampment, trade disruption." Harlan stood stiffly beside him. "We are handling it," the mayor replied carefully. "With or without clan assistance?" Varric asked pointedly, eyes shifting toward the southern fields where Redthorn banners still stood. Rowan stepped forward before Harlan could answer. "With cooperation," he said evenly. Varric studied him with cool assessment. "You are Rowan, the blacksmith who invited orc presence." "I defended someone," Rowan corrected. and in doing so bound your town to them. No, Rowan said calmly. We bound ourselves against whoever is trying to fracture us. Varric's expression hardened slightly. The crown offers resolution, he said. Redthorn withdraws. Greyhaven receives additional patrol support. Stability restored. At the edge of the square, Kayla stood still as stone. And if Redthorn does not withdraw? Rowan asked. Then the crown may interpret their presence as territorial assertion. A quiet threat. Murmurs spread. The offer sounded simple. Remove the orcs. Return to familiar authority. Let soldiers in blue armor patrol the roads instead of green-skinned warriors beyond the gate. Varric's gaze narrowed slightly. You could restore your standing fully, he said to Rowan. Publicly denounce the bond. State that it was misguided. The crown will protect you. The square went silent. Denounce the bond. Disavow the life debt. Kayla's expression did not shift, but something tightened in her stance. Thurrock stepped forward slightly from the southern edge of town, not advancing, but listening. Rowan felt the weight of eyes pressing into him. If he renounced the bond, Redthorn would withdraw without immediate violence. Arvek had promised that. The debt would dissolve publicly. Greyhaven would return to familiar hierarchy. He could go back to being only a blacksmith. Safe. Uncomplicated. Varric leaned closer. You do not belong to them, he said quietly. You belong to your people. Rowan looked around the square. Marin, flour-dusted hands folded tightly. Garen, barn half rebuilt with Redthorn help. Young merchants who had survived the ridge because clan shields held. And Kayla, who had stood beside him in marketplace chaos without striking first. You think this is about belonging, Rowan said slowly. It is, Varric insisted. No, Rowan replied. It's about fear. The captain's jaw tightened. You would choose them over your own? Rowan shook his head. I'm choosing both. The words startled even him. But once spoken, they felt solid. I will not denounce the bond, he continued clearly, voice carrying across the square. Redthorn defended this town at the ridge. They did not ignite that fire. They did not ambush their own patrol. And if the crown sees their continued presence as defiance? Varric pressed. Then the crown sees wrong, Rowan answered calmly. A ripple of tension passed through the crowd, but it was different now. Not fear. Resolve. Harlan stepped forward slowly. Greyhaven will not accuse without proof, the mayor said, voice steadier than before. Nor will we expel those who stood with us. Varric looked around, assessing. You align your town with clan politics, he said quietly. No, Rowan replied. We align against manipulation. Silence stretched long and tight. Finally, Varric exhaled through his nose. The crown will watch closely, he said. See that this unity holds. With that, the delegation withdrew. The square did not erupt in celebration. It simply breathed. Kayla approached Rowan once the crowd began dispersing. You risked protection of your own authority, she said quietly. I'm a blacksmith, he replied. I don't have authority. You have influence. He glanced toward the southern camp. I didn't choose Redthorn over Greyhaven, he said. No, she agreed. You chose not to be divided. The weight of that truth settled between them. He had been offered safety, offered restoration. All he had to do was reject the bond. Instead, he had accepted something harder. Shared consequence. Shared protection. As dusk settled over Greyhaven, Redthorn banners still stood beyond the walls. But now, fewer townsfolk avoided looking at them. And Rowan understood fully for the first time. The life debt was no longer just obligation or protection. It was allegiance chosen. And once chosen, it reshaped everything. The final confrontation did not begin with shouting. It began with coin. Thurrock's scouts intercepted a courier 2 days after Captain Varric's departure, caught slipping through the eastern woods under cover of rain. The man carried no clan markings, no crown insignia, only a leather pouch heavy with stamped silver and a coded ledger tucked into his boot. When the ledger was opened in Greyhaven's council hall, the truth became impossible to ignore. Payments had been issued to the same mercenary band that attacked the border ridge. Smaller payments tied to agitators within nearby towns. And the largest sum, marked only with a sigil used by certain trade consortiums, pointed toward a coalition of merchants who profited heavily during wartime shortages. War inflated prices. Peace flattened margins. Rowan stared at the inked entries with slow realization. They weren't trying to protect the crown, he said quietly. They were protecting profit. Harlan's face darkened. They burned Garen's barn, the mayor muttered. Risked lives at the ridge. For leverage, Kayla said evenly. The captured courier, bound to a chair in the center of the hall, finally spoke under pressure of evidence. You think lords want peace? He sneered. War feeds coin. Fear keeps markets desperate. And who ordered it? Thuruk demanded. Names aren't written, the courier spat. Only payments. It was enough. Rowan stood slowly. If this becomes clan retaliation, he said carefully, the merchants win. Kayla nodded once. If this becomes crown crackdown, she added, they win again. Silence stretched across the hall. The answer was neither revenge nor withdrawal. It was exposure. By sunset, Redthorn riders and Greyhaven messengers traveled together, delivering copies of the ledger to neighboring towns and to Captain Varric himself. The evidence could not be easily buried. Too many hands carried it. Within days, the Crown dispatched investigators, not soldiers, to question trade guild representatives. Markets trembled. Several prominent merchants were quietly arrested for conspiracy and incitement. The shadow fractured under light. Greyhaven felt different in the aftermath. Not triumphant. Stronger. Redthorn warriors no longer patrolled within the town walls daily, but neither did they fully withdraw. Instead, a small joint watch post was established near the southern gate, staffed by one clan guard and one town guard at all times. No banners raised higher than the other. Balanced. Garen's barn was rebuilt, not only by townsfolk, but by Redthorn hands as well. Timber beams were cut thicker this time. The roof reinforced. No one commented openly on the symbolism, but everyone felt it. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the fields gold, Rowan stood outside his forge beside Kayla. The crown hasn't ordered you gone, he observed. No, she replied. Your chieftain hasn't recalled you. No. He glanced toward the southern hills where only a handful of Redthorn tents remained now. The debt, he said slowly. Is it finished? Kayla considered the question carefully. The debt of blood is balanced, she said. You were shielded. We were shielded. The ledger exposed. And the bond. She met his gaze directly. Bonds are not ledger entries. He huffed softly. You're not leaving. Are you asking me to? He hesitated only briefly. No. A faint, rare smile touched her expression. In the weeks that followed, trade between Greyhaven and Redthorn territory began cautiously. Iron tools forged by Rowan found their way north. Redthorn timber arrived in exchange. Joint patrols along the ridge reduced bandit activity to nearly nothing. People adjusted. Not easily, but steadily. The marketplace where it had begun felt different now. Still loud, still imperfect. But when a pair of Redthorn travelers passed through weeks later, no mob formed. Eyes watched, but hands stayed lowered. Rowan leaned against the well one afternoon, listening to the usual noise of trade. You realize, Harlan said quietly beside him, you nearly started a war. I nearly stopped one, Rowan corrected. The mayor exhaled slowly. You built a bridge, he admitted. Rowan shook his head. No, I just refused to step aside. Kayla approached from across the square, braid catching light as she walked. No one scattered at her presence anymore. Some even nodded politely. Rowan watched her come closer and understood something simple and unshakable. He had defended one person in a moment of anger and chaos. The clan had answered with honor. Shadows had tried to fracture both sides. Instead, fire had forged something stronger. Not surrender, not dominance. Balance. As evening settled over Greyhaven and Redthorn banners stirred gently beyond the fields, Rowan realized the life, debt, had transformed. It was no longer about repayment. It was about recognition. And recognition, earned through fire and blood, built bridges no coin could burn down.